Okay, it's election week. People have already voted. There's a million odd people have already voted. I'll probably vote ahead of time because I'm working on election day, but it's been a lacklustre campaign from the major parties, no doubt about it. Full of not much, bit of backpedaling, bit of name calling, not great policy announcements on the whole, I don't think. Certainly not a great vision being espoused by anybody. Talk about weak and strong and, you know, people's interpretations of that. And then on the internet, people being upset and the usual talk about, what if everyone sucks, what are we going to do about it, and all those sorts of things. And so I just wanted to put some stuff in context, because when you don't love any particular party, or you don't love any particular person, or you have a specific dislike for people, the identity politics that, you know, the right sort of conservative parts of the political spectrum complain about a lot, but utilise on a daily basis, are used to if this, then that in their conversation. So if you don't like Dutton or whatever, you must love Labor or whatever. And I see those things in my DMs, for instance. And I just, even if you don't like a couple of people or a couple of things or a couple of policies, if one is much worse than the other, and we have to vote for somebody, and there is going to be a government, then it's worth making decisions based on better as opposed to good. Because if there's no good on offer, then we've got to go for better, as opposed to, oh, well, there's no good, we might as well vote for the worst possible option, which doesn't really make sense to me, but that's how the logic sort of works. And I'll get to why it's important that we also advocate to get more good in there, but we'll get to that at the end. I'm wearing a Don't Risk Dutton shirt because I believe that as a government, the coalition is the worst possible option at this election. Now, there's a reason for that. Well, there's actually heaps of reasons for that. And when we even just start by thinking about the challenges that we're having at the moment with housing, with the environment, with various social safety nets, and the provisions being made for those, with inequality, with sluggish wage growth and all that sort of stuff, that's been definitely a feature of my entire adult life. Of the last 29 years, 20 of them, the coalition have been in charge. Labor have been in charge for 6, including this term that we're in at the moment, which is like 3 of those 6, and we had a hung parliament for 3. So the idea that whatever's happened since 2022, when we had the last election and there was campaigning, teething, do some work campaigning, and how that's caused all of these issues is frankly disingenuous. And the political ramblings of Dutton and people from the coalition, I think, are absolutely disregarding the history and the legacies that they've left us. And I want to run through some of those legacies so that we don't forget, because the papers don't do a good job of talking about what's happened in an attempt to sort of be neutral, even though I don't think the news is very neutral that often. We don't talk about where things have been lied about or misrepresented or done differently. And so I just went off the top of my head. There's way more stuff, but I just wrote some stuff down that was off the top of my head. Dutton has already backflipped on sacking public service workers. And for someone who wants good jobs for people, that seems ridiculous. They're going to get 41,000 jobs that are going to end up in the private sector for people that cost the taxpayer more and do a worse job is ridiculous. It's going to reverse EV credits for people trying to switch to electric vehicles. And while I've got no great love for Elon Musk, electric vehicles are a great way to reduce emissions, and certainly part of the future plan of an emissionless or carbon neutral country for sure. They're spruiking nuclear technology that doesn't exist, that no one's got and no one's done. Now, they also went at the beginning of this term with a if you don't know, vote no situation. Well, they don't know how that technology is going to work. No one's ever done it before. It takes decades to deploy, and it's just a red herring to distract people, which again, disingenuous, awful, ways to try and look after their mining and mineral billionaire mates, which I think is, frankly ridiculous. If nuclear energy is going to be in the mix at some point, I don't think it needs to be. Most people don't think it needs to be. Most people think it's expensive and unnecessary, and we have great alternatives in the renewable energy space. But if you don't know, vote no should apply to this situation for them. If you don't know, vote no should also apply to the coalition's deal between the Liberals and the Nationals. It's a secret and no one knows what they commit to do for each other. So there's no transparency even when you vote them in as to what their deal is, their power sharing arrangement, what concessions they're making. We don't know about any of that. And that, again, is a lack of transparency, which they love. They think unis are elitist and don't want to give any grace to HECS fees, but they also want to scrap TAFEs. So, I mean, there's no fundamental belief in the power of education, unless you obviously privately educated or something like that, which I would argue is the most elitist of all of the possible education pathways. They don't believe in working from home. They don't believe in looking after people with childcare, particularly low-income people or people that aren't working, full time. Which again, ridiculous, and also doesn't pay any attention to the fact that support for childcare does not just mean that people then contribute via going to a job. That there are a bunch of things in the unpaid economy that are really useful: caring work, work in the community, and all of those sorts of things, even volunteering at schools and doing that sort of stuff, that are all supported by improved childcare access. There's been lying and misrepresentation from candidates across the country, from the coalition representatives, which, I mean, okay, that's not a great look, and also it's not a great indication that they vet their candidates well, that they actually care, and that they won't just say anything to try and get into power. Plenty of nepotism and jobs for mates across the board there while they were in power as well, which is, there's so many examples of that it sort of beggars belief. He plays the man, he doesn't answer questions, he just wants to talk about how crap, people are, and then avoid questions and avoid actual discussions about policy or being held to account for things that he said. The gas is a big deal at the moment. It's getting a lot of attention. Punt has put a lot of time and effort into billboards and talking about it. That Gorgon gas deal was done under the coalition government, under John Howard. I remember when it was done, and I remember at the time people saying, this is not a great deal. We're selling all this gas. We don't have a lien on it, and it's gone forever. We should be getting a better deal out of it. Now, not everyone will remember that time. It was in the early 2000s, but I do remember it, and I do remember people talking about it, and that all just kind of disappears, and as a result, we end up with a pretty shitty deal. They implemented a range of policies that have left us in this housing situation. I mean, the data is there, you can see it, that the changes to negative gearing and a number of other policies have absolutely split the cost of housing off wage rises. Wages haven't risen across the entire time that the coalition were in power in any meaningful way. And certainly then we look at things like social services and the New Start and JobSeeker, and those didn't go up either. And then the one time that they invested in the social service sort of space, when they were investing in COVID support, there were no safeguards in place to stop their rich mates and huge companies rorting it for billions of dollars. And we know there was tens of billions of dollars rorted out of that period of time for businesses that were already killing it, and they made an absolute fortune through COVID, and they kept the government money, which again is all taxpayer money that we've all paid for. He wasn't in his electorate for the flooding, which, I mean, at a personal level for Dutton, like, you talk tough and you talk like you care about community, and then you're off having dinner in Point Piper with billionaires. I mean, come on, it's a terrible look. And at the end of the day, he's a shill for miners and mining companies, and it's embarrassing. And it's a terrible look. So there's lots of reasons why I think Dutton in the coalition are the wrong party, right? Now, they might change their tune. Every election is a chance to see whether people have changed their tune. It's a chance to observe any growth in their character and make decisions based on that. Now, having said that, last election, Labor came in saying, we're going to be a party of government, and we're going to govern, and we're going to do all this great stuff, and we're going to bring our Labor values in and do this sort of thing. Great. So you look at that and you have some hope for change after Morrison's absolute debacle of a government. But then the Labor Party have come in, and the campaign financing laws that they worked with the coalition to pass are inadequate and not good enough. The union-busting legislation that they've hurried through and passed through is shockingly un-Labor and also just putrid policy making. absolutely shit effort on the Voice. I think that when they didn't think they were going to win, they started to back out so they wouldn't get whacked over the head with a lost policy, which I think was gutless, and I don't think that's very good. I think they've been gutless on Palestine, absolutely gutless in not speaking up about what is apparent to anyone with eyeballs, that is a humanitarian crisis, a genocide, the likes of which we haven't seen for a very long time, and I think that has been incredibly disappointing. They've approved new coal and gas mining concessions. They've allowed a bunch of negative environmental legislation to pass, which I don't agree with, and I think is terrible, particularly stuff down in Tassie with the salmon farming and some other things about exploratory oil and gas work, which is shocking. They didn't pass any lying in political advertising legislation, which should be an easy win, a hole-in-one, a slam dunk, that you shouldn't be allowed to lie in political advertising. They didn't push it through. Now, there are tactical and strategical things that we can disagree on. Fixing housing at this point in time is going to require multifaceted effort, a range of funding legislation setting up. It's going to need safeguards to prevent it from being rorted. It's going to need a whole bunch of stuff. And so I'll allow some grace for the complicated solutions that require a lot of moving parts. That's fair. That's fair for a lot of big issues. But certainly on a whole range of things, the Labor Party have not, I don't think, lived up to the mandate that they were given to work on some of these problems, even if you're not fixing them, but to have a vision and work towards it. So we're in this situation now where we've got this government that hasn't probably lived up to expectations, certainly from my point of view, and the absolute bottom of the barrel options over here. And now we've got an election where independents and minor parties have a part to play. Now, they're going to be different in every electorate. That's fine and that's fair. But I mean, when I think about people who have done a great job, I think about Max Chandler in Queensland from the Greens. I think about David Pocock. I think they're great representatives. I think down here we've got people like Pingers, who, Purple Pingers for the Victorian Socialists, who obviously isn't going to be a party of government, is running for the Senate, so can't be anyway, but is out there with a vision and with some answers and with a mandate to try and deliver some change that is going to be useful to the majority of people. Now, you don't have to agree with someone's entire politics, and certainly for the minor parties and the independents, they're not going to form government. But the hung parliament that we had some years ago in the Gillard era was a very productive parliament. And so going into this election, thinking about how your votes can empower the voices of independents and non-major party people is worth considering. And scaling your preferencing to reflect that, I would say don't risk Dutton. I would say put the coalition at the bottom. But then based on where you are and who's there, maybe an independent, maybe a Green, with the mandate that I think they understand, or they have been talking about understanding, that they are in there to represent these interests for the betterment of the country, to improve things like housing and social security, and look after people better and stop the system from being rorted by big corporations and incredibly wealthy people. And perhaps if they get in, they can get the truth in political advertising laws through. They can change campaign financing to make it easier for independents and things to get in there. They can work on deals to improve the everyday lives of everyday Australians. And look, will it happen? Maybe. If they get in, maybe. But we get to then audit their behaviour at the end of it in another 3 years to decide whether or not they've actually lived up to the expectations that we had, if that's the case. And if nothing else, to send a message to the major parties that if you just continually look after yourselves and try and protect your own patch and have no vision that involves looking after people and doing a good job, that is busy yelling at each other as opposed to paying attention to the issues that Australians actually face, that then they need to step up and do better. And for me, I think it's a great opportunity to think about it. Obviously, it's going to differ from electorate to electorate, but certainly worth considering putting the minor parties or independents at the top if you think that they're good people, trustworthy people, and they've got a vision for how to hold the major parties accountable to doing a better job. and we go to maybe a hung parliament, or we go to a parliament where the balance of power is shared a little bit, and we see if we can get some progress in these areas that have been stagnant for 29 years, longer in some cases. And 29 years is a long time. A lot has changed. There's been a lot of different things come into play in that 29 years. But from 2025, 2026 onwards, we need to meet people where they are, meet the system where it is, do a better job of looking after people. And I think, look, read the policies from the members in your area, make decisions, use the voting calibration web pages that are out there to check on your preferences. Use your preferences, don't waste your votes, and hopefully the next Parliament of Australia will understand that mucking around, infighting and protecting your own jobs is not what you're there to do, that we want a strong public service, good jobs, lots of support for Australian families and people. We want to look after the environment. We want to make sure everyone's housed, educated, healthy, happy, access to healthcare. All the things that make Australia great, we improve and enhance, and all the things that take away from it, the rorting of profits, the gouging of money, the over-influence of billionaires, and the destruction of like our absolutely amazing ecosystems, we dial that back. It's a long one, but it's worth putting out there because, look, election time's important, and whether you're consider yourself political or not, it affects everybody. It's worth thinking about. It's worth looking back, looking forward, looking at the people who are supposed to be representing us, asking for better. It's totally fair. I think we can ask for better. We can ask for better people. Get behind the voices that are better in the world. Get behind people with integrity and character. Let's talk about a positive vision for the future, and let's try and vote in people who are going to do it. So good luck with your voting. If you've watched all of this, thanks very much, and we'll see you at the polls. Democracy sausage time. Thanks, guys.